What if I told you that if you followed your intuition and you trusted it fully, that you could unlock massive opportunity, brilliant clarity, abundance and prosperity, and a life wilder than your wildest dreams? That is the power of your intuition. And in this podcast, I'm going to teach you how to unlock the power of your intuition, use it with intention to manifest whatever you want with precision and ease instantly. And yes, there is some sort of delay between you manifesting what you want and actually getting it. There is always that gap, but you embody that energy now, therefore changing your reality right now. So intuitive alchemy is a manifestation method that is unconscious, essentially. You're taking information from the universe that is being given to you and using it as feedback to manifest. And it is this constant back and forth exchange. And you're transforming that universal energy and creating with it, because that's ultimately what we came here to do. So I'm going to teach you how to harness this energy to create the life that you want. And that is what intuitive alchemy is. That's what this podcast is about. And this is the method I'm going to teach you. So this episode is an inaugural episode. It is a bit of a storytelling episode, just to give you some information about me, what I do, why I do it, what I aim to do to help you with in terms of your intuitive development, what to do with it, how to harness it, all that. So intuitive alchemy is a separate podcast from my other podcast, just so I could teach you this method, because it's that powerful, it's that important that I have a podcast just to teach you. So I'm Holly. I'm an intuitive spirituality coach. I teach people how to transform power to purpose and purpose into power, and to utilize your innate gifts to manifest whatever you want. There are no limits here, and we're going to explore that by understanding our intuition better, how it connects to the divine, and how infinite its potential truly is, which is your potential as well. There's no limits here. So I started this from a very young age. I have 30 years of experience with witchcraft, the occult, metaphysics, divination, you name it, because my grandmother was a tea leaf reader, and I had access to her spiritual tools from a very young age. And since then, I've been impacted by my grandmother's legacy, not realizing it till I'm much older, until recently, actually, that I really understood the depth of her impact and how it changed the trajectory of my life, how it's made me a better person, how it's evolved me, how it's led me via my own gifts. And so I lead by example. And I just want to be an example of what's possible for people, because I grew up in poverty. I grew up to a broken family. My parents divorced when I was very young. And we grew up in poverty as a result, because my mother was abandoned, so to speak, by my dad. And she was chronically ill as well. So back in the 90s, it was difficult for a woman to be single, essentially. So I grew up ending up going backwards from middle class to poverty, and living that way for most of my life until I was about 17, when I decided to go to college to become a dental assistant. And that led me to a higher wage, which eventually led me to being in the military, where I gained my first adult job. And so this job was very secure. It gave me a huge pay grade. And that's ultimately when I started to break the mold of conformity. There was an idea that I had that I needed to leave where I was living, which was Winnipeg, it's a very traumatized city. It's a bit of a vortex. So if you live in Winnipeg, you tend to get stuck doing the same thing until you die, essentially. And that was not something I wanted to concede to, so I had to move. And so the military was an outlet to get away from the Winnipeg and the pressures of my aging mother and her illness, so to speak. So I grew up very young as an old soul, either feeling responsible for my mother and having this legacy looming above my head. And so I used the military to run away. And that was really one of the first massive intuitive hits that really, really broke the mold of what I was doing where I was living. It was a means to an end. And so I ended up coming back to Winnipeg after I joined the military to take care of my mother because she was so sick. And we moved to BC, British Columbia, like a year, 15 months later on a whim. And I left my job. I quit the military, just to make that clear. And I moved across the country. And that was another intuitive hit. And so that broke me out of Winnipeg, finally. I was out of its vortex. And I landed in British Columbia. And 8 months later, I ended up being a homeowner. So not only am I breaking past poverty and finally leaving the ghetto, the projects, because that's how poor we were, and breaking past that poverty level, which is the hardest level to break. It's easier to go from middle class to upper class than it is to leave poverty and go to middle class. So I finally broke that mold. And because I moved to BC, my life flourished and I ended up getting back into the military. So there's a lot of this back and forth. This was all intentional. This is all being divinely timed and guided because I was just simply following these massive intuitive hits that were leading me on my path without me knowing it. Intuition is very unconscious. We use it all the time, whether we're aware of it or not, and everybody has it. So I just want to make that clear. So that led me to BC, where I ultimately ended up in an abusive relationship. And those were other things that I needed to heal that prevented me from healing and growing. So I ended up in a very dark place because I ignored my intuition. And that's another thing I want to teach is what happens when you don't follow your intuition and its guidance that it's trying to give you. Even when it's screaming at you, people will still ignore it. So I did, and it ended up hurting me. And I ended up in a really dark place that I ended up finally breaking once I started therapy because I wanted to end it all, and I knew that it was either end it all or try to get better, but I needed help. So all this time I'm following my intuition, and it's changing my life in like instance and fast because I'm breaking into these different areas of life and really leaving my comfort zone. So being so traumatized by growing up in poverty and my parents' divorce and growing up in an abusive home and being in abusive relationships, including the military where there's sexual misconduct and it's a very toxic place, I was being given these opportunities to either make a decision to stay or leave and face the consequences either way. So once I started realizing that I needed to start doing more of what felt good, i.e. following my intuition, that's when my life started to drastically change, and I kept breaking past these different barriers of growth. So eventually I left my toxic ex who I was obsessed with and had trauma bond, and there was this whole twin flame thing. But I ended up meeting my husband literally a year and 1 day later after breaking up with my ex. And that whole year was really messy and really difficult, but I got through it. And because I followed my intuition, I ended up meeting my husband, who we now have 2 beautiful children, and I'll get to that later. But that was because I followed my intuition. So I ended up having to leave the military because my mental health was so bad, and the military is able to medically release you if you can't get well within a certain period of time, which is literally just a year. So that wasn't possible. So I ultimately had to either sacrifice my mental health or leave the military. And it was terrifying to give up on that dream that I've pursued for years at this point. And the military is a government job. It's very cushy. You get like 30 days off a year. It's easy to progress. You get promoted. You make a lot of money once you start going up in the ranks. And you have your pension. So it's a very cushy job. It's a very secure job. And it's not something that people give up easily because of that. And that's just our conditioning, is that we need to have these jobs first and foremost, and then be stuck in them till we die, essentially, or until we retire, which is in our 60s. And all of this just isn't what I want. And I'm not living that life now. So I had to make a choice for my mental health, and I did. And I met my husband that meantime, and I ended up going to school for social work. So I have that as a background to all this as well, as well as psychology. So there's this science meets spirituality lens that I look at everything through that I'm going to use as a guide when I'm doing these episodes and I'm teaching. And so I ended up leaving the military, still following my intuition this entire time, but that's how fast things were changing. That I met my husband a year and a day later, and I ended up making a lot of money after leaving the military, and things ended up being okay. And here I am, much happier. But it was so scary, but it was necessary to break past those molds. And when I reflect on this, it's just proof how fast things can change when you trust your intuition, you let it guide you. So this is what's led me this entire time. And it wasn't until I became a mother that I really tuned into that wisdom. And there's a reason for that, because mothers are very intuitive, and all that wisdom comes from the womb. And ultimately, having children changes your life regardless. So once my daughter was born over 3 years ago, life changed drastically because my parents died. 3 weeks after my daughter was born, my mother died. And 10 months after that, my dad died. And they both died from cancer. And that's a whole other story that I'll probably tell another day. But that was only 3 years ago. And here I am now, living and thriving and doing my thing. And I have 2 beautiful children. And it's because I trust my intuition, and I trust that if I don't follow it and I don't do the things that feel good, that I will be stuck in that vortex. And so many people are. And so I created this podcast and the sacred circle that I run to help people to break these molds, to get past these challenges of life and alchemize the pain that comes from them, to live a life that's fulfilling and with purpose. So as I heal, life becomes more magical. And as a result of that, I become more in tune with my intuition, realizing that's what's driving this. That's what's driving this ship. So it's taking this power and intentionally using it to move forward. And so here I am. Long story short, that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm doing these things. But I didn't start following my intuition as like an experiment until very recently. So my son was born 4 months ago. So I went through the last 3 years with my daughter and my parents being dead and dealing with all this grief. And I spent 2024 pregnant, most of it being pregnant. So I got pregnant in January, and it was October when my son was born. So I spent the whole year being pregnant and really exhausted and really sick. So there wasn't much that I could do in terms of productivity. Even my business was affected by that because I couldn't show up for like half my pregnancy. I was like that exhausted. My brain was just dead. So it led me to a lot of stillness, which stillness is what brings up discomfort for us. This is why we try to run away from our emotions, and we cloud our thinking with disassociation and rumination and dark thoughts and trying to cope with them and cope with life, and we run away from them. And so I couldn't do that. And I don't like doing that, because you have to acknowledge these things and work on them and integrate them in order to grow. So I needed to use it or be stuck in that pain. So 2024 was either really uncomfortable or I could use it to grow. So I spent now I'm back on track, sorry. So 2024 was just being pregnant, and that stillness brought up a lot of dark stuff. Like obviously the grief that I'm constantly shoving down is coming up. And I worked through so many layers and so many like deaths internally, and old versions of me and old programming and past hurts and emotions were all being processed because I had no choice. There was nothing to do, and I was bored. So I had to process all this stuff, and I really evolved into this new version of myself as I was growing my son in my belly, and all that wisdom from my womb was coming up, and there was all this symbolism and themes around rebirth and growing and growth. And that's what my pregnancy was this. Not only was I growing a human, I was growing this new version of me that wasn't born until my son was born. And that was only 4 months ago. And since then, just to bring this all together, life has been so crazy. It was like there was this new pressure that was put on me, mostly because I spent 2024 resting and I need to recuperate any losses that came from that. But also, I just want to provide a certain life for my children. So my first child was about introducing to me to motherhood and healing those wounds and all that. And then my son is about bringing in this whole new way of life. And the way I describe it is that I've followed my intuition through these portals. And my daughter was one portal, going from not being a parent to being a parent. And that's a complete transformation, a new way of life. And that happens every time you add someone to the mix. So my son was born, and yes, I've been a mother and I've been doing this for 3 years now, but bringing in another person is going to change life as I know it. So I ended up walking through another portal, but this time it led me to an even higher level. So I don't want to take too long describing the story, but it really is going to start coming together now so that we can move on to other things. But my son was born at the end of October, and I walked through that portal that I'm talking about, and life changed completely. And now I have this pressure, but all this wisdom from this growth that I've done over the last year and all these rebirths. And as I walked, through the hospital doors to have my surgery, my C-section to give birth to my son, I knew I was walking through the portal. I knew that when I left my house that morning and I walked into the hospital that I was going to come out completely different 3 days later. And it was so true because that's what my intuition is telling me. It's always connected to the future. There is no future, there is no past. So we are receiving information from both our past and our future, and it is always talking to us through our intuition. So I just have this like innate knowing, and that's my skill, is that I'm very claircognizant. And so when my son was born and I brought him home completely changed, there was that pressure that I had to start doing something different, even though I just had given birth and I just had surgery. I love working and I'm a bit of a nerd, and I can't really sit still because of all that stillness stuff. And so I got to work I like to fill my time with working. I love it. So a couple weeks after my son was born, I started working again, but this time it was different, and I was approaching things differently. And whatever I was doing beforehand didn't work anymore. There was no, I was done with it because I was done with that way of life. So my intuition was leading me to this new way of life that I had no way to anticipate until after my son was born. So I was just blindly going into the unknown at this point, but feeling so brave in doing so because I electively walked into surgery. I've already had another C-section. I knew how hard it was. I knew how hard the recovery was. And birth is scary no matter what. So I just allowed it to lead me, knowing that experience that I went through was a form of energy I could use to empower myself. And I did. So I feel even less afraid of the unknown at this point because I've been through a lot, if you can tell by this story so far. So I needed a way to make things work because I had to restore my business. And at this point, I'm completely pivoting. I'm restarting everything. Everything is brand new. Everything about my life is brand new since giving birth to my son 4 months ago. And so I took some courses, I downloaded some resources. I've been really learning and buckling down on how to take charge of my life and my finances and my business and my growth and everything, and doing everything with intention and following that guidance that I receive. And I've gone through so much immense growth that I don't even recognize the person from January. That's how fast these things have changed because of my intuition. And just following my intuition and not ignoring it and saying yes to it more. And it's been a wild experiment. And there's been so many shifts and ascensions, and the intuitive hits and downloads are constant. And there's so many synchronicities. It's insane. And I'll get to that because we're getting quite close. But I ended up realizing that I wanted to create a community on a platform called School, and that's the Sacred Circle. And if you want to join, I would love it, because this is what I teach and this is what you'll learn. And the community is beautiful. And I will tell you in a second how amazing it is. But I decided to start a group on School, which, if you don't know, it's a learning platform. It's gamified. It's so much fun. The whole community is so different from what people are used to. And that's one of the features about it. So I didn't feel called to School before until very recently. And before that, I didn't want anything to do with it. I had no need for it. I didn't want to go things about that way. And so with one of the resources I bought, it led me to School, and School is what changed everything. And I started that community in December from this random ad I saw that was selling this thing for spiritual coaches and teaching them this method of how to get people into your business. And so it led me to making School. And that was probably the biggest intuitive hit that I had. And that community grew by the end of this last December, to 140 members. It is the 70th top spiritual community, like in the spiritual category on School. It is the 70th out of like thousands. And I started it in December, and it grew so fast. And the community inside is so beautiful, and it's so amazing, and it's so magical. And literally everyone is manifesting each other. So many community members have told me that they asked for this. And when you ask for the teacher, they show up. And that's what happened. And I'm convinced that one of the prayers that one of the members made was that intuitive hit that I received. And I'm becoming more dialed in with how powerful your intuition is, because that is how powerful it is. That's how all connected we are, and how that quantum field works, and how the universe works, and how we all work together as a symbiotic machine, that I'm convinced one of my members manifested me. And that's the intuitive download I received. Because how connected we are after only 2 months is insane. And I love all my members, and it's so special in there. And I would love to have you in there, by the way. I'll leave a link in the show notes in the description so that you can join if you want. No pressure. But really, it's so magical. And all the comments from all the beautiful souls in there are saying that this came when they asked for it, and that I pick up on what they want, and they ask for things in the universe, and I receive it, and it happens. And they're like, holy cow, that was amazing. I was just thinking about this. And I'm like, literally, we're all manifesting together. Even me as the coach, as the guide, as the leader, the facilitator of this group, I'm manifesting them just as much as they are manifesting me. And the opportunities that are coming up are wild. Like, I had a meeting with one of my members the other day, and she's manifesting these crazy things that didn't start until after she joined the group. And she's the one that I received the download from. And so she's inviting me to be a part of the things she's manifesting. And they are the wildest opportunities, like speaking engagements and talking to a crowd of 500 women, and putting her voice out there, and being an ambassador to this huge organization. And she says it's all because of me. And I'm like, I'm not even doing anything. What's happening? My life is so crazy. And I owe it all to following my intuition. Like, it is unbelievable. And it's only been 3 months, and I've spent my whole life following my intuition. But since I've started doing it intentionally and living life, letting it lead the way, and saying yes to it without even thinking, and just following that flow, I'm in constant flow state, and all the synchronicities are insane. There are so many, and it's constant. It blows my mind. Like, common themes will come. There's so many patterns. There's so many signs from the universe saying yes. There's so many confirmations from people saying, yes, this is what I asked for. And so I want to show you that this is like real-time evidence of what's possible if you follow your intuition. You just say yes to it and just learn to trust it. And the more you trust it, the more it works. And the more it works, the more you trust. And then you're not even second guessing it anymore. And then now, because of all this, I have so much faith and so much trust in the universe that I feel so seen and so supported by the universe. It is insane. Like, nothing worries me anymore. Like, I'm pretty tough-skinned to begin with because of the military and all the stuff that I've been through and giving birth twice and all that. But and going through my parents' death, but it's been insane since I started following it on purpose. And my whole point of this is to teach you to do the same. So I have what's called the Intuitive Alchemy Academy, and that is inside the Sacred Circle as a course to teach you how to do this. This is the course in how to master the art of manifestation using your intuition, and that is inside the Sacred Circle. But if you are a beginner and you want to keep it simple, I also made an ebook called Intuitive Alchemy, The Art of Manifestation, which is also linked in the comments, in the show notes, in the description. Just go and look. Whatever platform this is on, go and look, and you'll see the link to either the ebook or the school community, and you can do whatever you want, and I'm here for you no matter what. So Intuitive Alchemy Podcast is going to also teach it as for free. I'm going to teach you this no matter what. Obviously, there's more detail and support and all that in my resources, but this podcast is to put this out there so that I could just teach people to live life with purpose, following their intuition and manifest crazy things. That's all I want for people. So I'm going to teach this no matter what. And if you decide you want more, then you could buy my book or work with me, whatever you feel called to, whatever you feel led to. By your intuition. Just trust it and just follow it. If it tells you to work with me, here I am. So that's how this all came to be, essentially. Long story short, that's the episode. So once I started trusting my intuition, crazy stuff started happening, and I've been through so much evolution since. So this is going to have a ripple effect because of how connected we all are. So I'm hoping with even just the few people who start out watching my podcast pick this up and then teach other people how to do it, and then they teach other people how to do it, and there's this huge cascade of inner healing and alignment and authenticity and people showing up for themselves and for others and loving more and loving life more, not being so miserable and anxious all the time and listening to things that make them feel good and doing things that feel good. That's what this podcast is all about, with an emphasis on intuitive development. And I'll teach you like what's keeping you stuck, how to use discernment, how to use the law of least resistance. All of that is going to be part of this podcast. That is the whole point of this. So inside the community, inside the ebook is the how, and the podcast is the what, to give you inspiration, to give you insights, to give you actionable tips, to help you clear blockages, to help increase your vibration. That's what this podcast is about. So I hope that you follow me. I hope that we go on this journey together. And I'm so excited to have you here. I'm so excited to start this podcast because this is my third one I've started. And this is it. Like, I'm so excited to talk about it. I could talk about it forever. I have so much information I want to share. So I hope that you follow along. And I hope that you join the Sacred Circle, because I'd love to have you. And so would everyone else. So with that being said, that's my story. That's who I am. You'll get to know me more, and you'll get to know what this method is all about. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.